So just as a show of hands, who have been or are in a team of one currently? Wow, a lot of people. Yeah. So I'll be able to tell you a couple of things I've learned. Who are in a small team, let's say 2 or 3 people. Okay, so what I'm going to tell today also applies to a smaller team. And I guess everyone else works in a big team. So you should learn a thing or two as well. So as Claire mentioned, I'm from Montreal, Canada. So as a proper Canadian, I'd love to say sorry about my French accent. 39 years old, I'm a wanderluster, foodie, craft beer lover. So I appreciate the beer on tap here. I'm a geek, and I also happen to be the assistant director of BI at Absolunet. So Absolunet, just quickly, we're an e-commerce agency. So you most likely haven't heard about us. But we work with some major clients in North America, including B2C and B2B companies like New Balance, Fujifilm, Geary's, and Beverly Hills. So some of the big companies. We do e-commerce development, we do marketing, we do e-commerce expertise end-to-end. We're a 250 employees company, and we've been growing about 40% year over year. And about 2 years ago, our data stack looked something like this. I had a different role back then. I was responsible to coach a team of 15 product owners. I was not in BI, I was not in data, but I came to realize that, hey, we're a pretty big company. We have about 15 different teams working on many projects for clients, about 15 product owners, and we had about 15 different ways of tracking projects, 15 ways of tracking the health of projects, 15 different ways of retrieving data from the different systems. And the company has been in existence for about 20 years. So we had a lot of stovepipe systems, legacy systems that was hard to get data out from. So one day I came to my boss and I told him, no, we can't do this. I can't live like this anymore. So I said, we really need to look into acquiring a BI system. And he said, well, can you look into it? Remember, I didn't know anything about data. I was just a geek. But of course, I said yes. So Anne started a pretty long story of me getting into data and trying to understand everything about data. And hence came my first learning, which may sound obvious to some people, but time is a finite resource. It sounds obvious, but it's not always obvious to make the right decisions based on that philosophy, I guess. So we first started with a pilot project using Sisense. So end-to-end product, easy to learn, easy to put in place. We did the pilot, single source to start with. Been pretty successful, enough for the owners of the company to say, okay, we're gonna invest a shitload of money, pardon my French, and a data stack, and we'll build something. So finally did a second phase, which I call the F word. What did I get myself into? Where to start? So we went with Redshift just because as a technology company, we were already pretty invested in AWS. Went with Aluma because it seemed pretty flexible. It was a Python code engine. You could do transformations in Python. It was super cool. And it was cheap. And we went with Looker because it was the best in class and the sales guys were pretty good. And it was a fail, of course. Here I was, I didn't know much. Had to learn ETL, had to learn data warehousing, had to learn transformation, had to learn LookML, had to learn statistics, well, I had a base of statistics, but had to learn everything, and I had this super complicated stack. And that was really the failure, was not so much the data issues or the technical issues, because those could be resolved. The main issue is that as a single person team, I was spending most of my time trying to get data in, but not using the data. So I was costing the company a lot of money. The infrastructure was costing the company a lot of money, and they were not getting value out of it. So that was really the main failure. So as we came into the third phase, so about a year ago, completely changed the stack. We changed the ETL tool to Fivetran because Fivetran, if you've used it before, it's plug and play. There's no work to be done. Just put your credentials, everything works. It's the Apple of ETL. It's amazing. Went to Snowflake, near zero management. Again, super easy. So easy, in fact, that I had spent weeks putting in place infrastructure that I had in phase 2 and about 2 hours in phase 3. And I had everything up and running. That was amazing. We kept Looker, but we introduced dbt in the mix. I don't know if you ever heard of dbt, but basically moved all the transformation logic into dbt so that I could use and leverage its features like testing. So now the time that I was spending, look at it more like this. So almost nothing on data sourcing infrastructure and a lot more on actually modeling data and using that data for the company. So time is a finite resource. So if you're a small team, don't over-engineer your stack. Use the best tools on the market that will do the work for you and focus where you can bring value. The second learning I've made was to embrace the Agile mindset, which, well, if you haven't already, but had been working in Agile for about 10 years. But here I'm really talking about the mindset, not the methodology, because as a single person team, it's kind of difficult to apply Scrum or some of the bigger frameworks. But what's important is the philosophy behind the Agile mindset. And to me, what it means is this. So actively collaborating with stakeholders. Don't try to go away for a few weeks and build something. You need to really work closely with the business. Sounds obvious, but it's not the natural reaction for a lot of people. Working in iterations. So start small, build something, get feedback, improve. Inspecting that thing. So are you on the right course? If not, course correct, work on something else and adjust. Reacting positively to change. Sometimes the business, especially in an organization that's small, with a small data team, they won't be too mature in terms of data awareness. So they will ask questions, they will want to change things because they don't know what they want in the business. So react positively, learn with them, and things will go great. And finally, the most important thing is focusing on value delivery. Again, working on the technical stuff is fun, but that's not what interests the business. So focus on what brings value to the company and therefore prioritize in a thoughtful way. So you do need to have your personal roadmap of what you need to do from a technical point of view, but you need also to work on what the business expects from you. And also a quick note about this phrase, which is pretty common in the Agile world, which is done is better than perfect. And I want to underline something here, is that done and perfect refers to the scope, not the quality. So as you work in iterations with the company and you try to deliver things, you should never sacrifice quality, especially with data. But you can sacrifice on the scope of what you're delivering. Maybe they would love to be able to slice down something in 20 different ways, but maybe the really important way is 2 different ways. So focus on that and put the rest for later. The third learning, you may not have official team members, but you have other colleagues and the workplace. And what you can do is cultivate champions in the workplace so that they can become unofficial team members. So this is TJ. TJ is the Scrum Master of our marketing team. So he's not a data guy, but he's a power user. He loves data, he loves to dig into data. And he has a pretty good eye for what's wrong and some of the data. So it's been an invaluable unofficial team member because if I were to make a mistake or something that didn't make sense, it would notice right away. So really, I onboarded him as part of the team and just leveraging his eye for what was wrong because I did make a lot of mistakes at the beginning. So how do you cultivate champions? Well, first, find your data hungry users. So there will always be people in the company that are more hungry for data than anybody else. So find them, talk to them, involve them as soon as you can. Start small because you can't deal with too much people at the beginning, but ensure their autonomy through training. Make sure that they are interested, that they know how to get their data, how they can work with you. And finally, act on their feedback. That's super important because they are involved. They want to be involved. So you want to make sure that they want to stay involved. So if they have feedback, if they have suggestions, act on them. The fourth learning I've made is leverage online communities. So you may be in a team of one, you may have champions in the workplace, but sometimes you need expertise, opinions, you need to have best practices, you need to see, hey, has anyone solved this before? So there are beautiful online communities, where there are really generous people will want to share their expertise, share their past experiences, so you can leverage that collective intelligence. So two of my favorite communities, which I guess most of them already know, is the DBT Slack and the Locally Optimistic Slack. Two great communities, really bright people on there. It's absolutely amazing. So if you're not already on those Slacks, I invite you to join. But something that's important when you join an online community is, yes, you can take a lot, but you need to give back as well. So first thing, out of respect, read the rules of the community. We see so very often people who are just joining, not reading the rules, just asking questions, cross-posting everywhere. Not a good idea. So if you really want people to help you, you need to respect them. Do search previous conversations. Sometimes the issue you're facing, you're not the first one to see it. So search. Put some effort in your questions. So the more effort you put into your questions, the more chance you're gonna have a lot of people that wants to jump in and try to resolve your issue. I personally, when I see a question that I don't know the answer, that's one of my way of learning, I try to answer the question myself. I will search through documentation, I will try to do a proof of concept, and that's how I learn. Avoid the can I do this question, just try it. Like, can I do exclude the model by doing this syntax? Well, just try it. And finally, as I said, contribute back wherever you can. So whether that's answering questions, contributing documentation, posting code if you know how to code Python, whatever, but keep the community alive. It's not a one-way road. The fifth learning I've made is to really master your toolbox. So time is a finite resource. You're working on the right task with the right tools, with the right infrastructure. But an easy way to have more time is to really master your toolbox. So yes, of course, I mean, everything you see there, you need to master Python, you need to master SQL, and then the functions of your data warehouse, and the DBT functions, and statistics, or whatever. But that's your core skills. I also mean things like exploring packages for your code editor. It amazes me. I've been working with developers for about 15 plus years. And it always amazes me when I meet a senior developer who could probably write the book about PHP, or write the book about Perl, or write the book about .NET, or whatever, but who are still doing copy-paste using the mouse and the menu. That just amazes me. So explore your code editor, explore the packages, things that can save you time, things, and the case of DBT, which are really useful, the multi-cursors, the case changes, the JSON converters. So tools that will really boost your productivity. Same thing for keyboard shortcuts. Do you want to change case by selecting everything and going to the menu, or just Command K, Command L? That's super quick. Supercharging your command line as well. Tools like ZSH as a shell with Presto will boost your productivity with a lot of more information on your shell than you could have just with the default one when you set up a Mac. Setting up aliases in your command line. Again, there's commands that you're going to do over and over and over in the course of a day. Have aliases so they can save some typing. Use the snippets manager. Who here uses snippets manager? Not a lot of people. Okay. So over and over, and in your course of your day, you're going to do the same things. You're going to reuse the same patterns of code. So it's a really good idea to have a snippets manager where you can save those snippets of code, those patterns that you see always and over time, so you can find them easily. So you don't have to worry, oh, how do I do again a conditional branch to check the target? No, you have a snippets manager. And what I do personally is that on Slack, when I see Drew or Claire posting a piece of code that I find really interesting that I have no use of at the moment, I will save that in a snippets manager. And 6 months from now, I'm going to say, oh, I remember I've seen that before. And I'll have that piece of code not too far away. And finally, last tip is read the release notes of your tools. So read, if you're using Snowflake, read the release notes. Every month they release new features. It's super important. You'll find new functions. It can save you a lot of time. So just an example, just this month, Snowflake released the new qualify predicate that allows you to filter a window function. So that's amazing. That saves a lot of time, a lot of code. But if you don't read the release notes, you won't know about it. So this is an example of a command line alias, which I love, which sounds pretty gnarly, but what it does is that if I type GH and a Git repository on my command line, it opens up the GitHub page. So it's pretty cool. I don't want to type that all the time, so I just type GH. And if you want to know how to do this, I can show you after. So the final point, the final learning is manage your stress. Being in a team of one, you need to be super organized. You and you alone are responsible for the work to be done. And although the circumstances of working alone might vary between different organizations, we all face similar challenges. We often shoulder greater responsibility for the work that the business expects from us. We may be involved in critical projects, but we have very little support. So you can feel isolated, you can feel the stress, and you can become actually ill. So that's not a good thing. So you need to learn how to manage your stress. So how do you do this? So the first trick is to prioritize and organize. So my personal trick is to have daily and monthly targets, things that I want to achieve today, things that I want to achieve this month. And I use the Eisenhower matrix. Who here is aware of the Eisenhower matrix? Not a lot of people. You may have seen it before, but just not know the name. It's the 4-quadrant where you have urgent, important, not urgent, not important. So if you prioritize your work on this matrix, it's going to be a lot easier to decide what to work on. Make some time for yourself. Again, that's super important. It may be too easy to get stuck in the work that you have to do, but take the time to socialize, both with your colleagues in the company and with virtual colleagues on the Slack communities. Set yourself some learning time. So again, being efficient means learning new tools and learning new ways to work. So keep yourself a bit of time in your schedule for that. This one is almost obvious. We see it very often, but healthy diet, healthy mind, good exercise, healthy mind, healthy body. So that's super important, especially if you're working alone. Planting seeds in the company for long-term results. So if you're working alone, you're working in a small team, you want to hire someone, hopefully one day. And I've never been in a company where you can just come up to HR, to the CEO or whoever's responsible to approve hires and say, hey, I need someone tomorrow. No, you need to plant the idea, you need to cultivate like a flower. It takes some time. I recently doubled my team from 1 to 2 people. I hired Julia, who's here today. It took me 6 months to convince my management to be able to finally hire someone, because we're a service company, so we can hire anyone who's billable. But non-billable roles for us, it's expensive, so it's hard. So work on the long term. And finally, and that's probably the most important, accept that you cannot do everything. It's physically impossible. You cannot do everything that the company asks for you. You're gonna have a billion requests coming from everyone. So just accept that you cannot do it, let it go. The only thing that's important is explaining to your colleagues why you're not going to work on their requests. If they understand why, there won't be any issues. And that's pretty much it. So in short, don't over-engineer your stack. Keep it as simple as possible from the start. Ensure you're working mostly on value-added projects and correct course where appropriate. Cultivate strong relationships with your colleagues and online. Be proficient with your toolbox. Remember that you cannot do it all, and have fun. So that's what I have for you. Thank you.